My parents uninvited me from Thanksgiving in a family group chat and signed their message with "Love, Mom and Dad," like they hadn't just exiled me. My name is Rebecca Hart. I'm 32 years old, and that message shattered something inside me that I didn't even know was still fragile. They said I had embarrassed my younger sister, Vanessa, and that for the peace of the family, I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving dinner. At first, I just stared at the screen, reading their words over and over, hoping they would rearrange into something less cruel, something less pointed. I whispered to myself, they can't be serious. But deep down, I knew they were. Then came the part that hit me hardest. You always find a way to make things about you, Rebecca. We don't want drama this year. Drama. That was their word for me. After all the years I stayed silent for them, I was the drama. And while my heart was still stumbling to catch up with what I had just read, Vanessa's boyfriend, a man I'd barely spoken to outside of polite greetings, replied into the same group chat with a single sentence that flipped everything on its head. He wrote, "Actually, I think Rebecca deserves to be there more than anyone." And I swear, my entire chest went still. Before I continue, if you're listening to this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and stay with me until the end because this story goes deeper than family drama. It's about truth finally cracking through carefully painted lies. The moment his message appeared, the silence in the chat was suffocating. I stared at my screen so hard I forgot to blink. He wasn't just defending me, he was challenging Vanessa and challenging my parents, and I had no idea why. That's when the memories began flooding back. Memories of how this family was built on one unspoken rule. Vanessa is the golden child. Rebecca is everything else. Vanessa and I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside of Richmond. Our home had white shutters, a tire swing in the backyard, and hydrangeas my mother fussed over every summer. To anyone driving past, we were the postcard example of happy American family. But inside, there was always an invisible scale, and I was always on the losing end of it. Vanessa is 28 now, and for as long as I can remember, she was adored, praised, elevated. She was the achievement. I was the effort. When she got an A, she was gifted with celebration. When I got an A, the reaction was, "Good. I'm glad you're finally applying yourself." When she got accepted into university, Mom cried and called her my brilliant baby girl. When I got into mine, my father said, "That's nice, Rebecca," and went back to reading the paper. But even as I tell you this, I need you to understand something. I never envied her. I never hated her. I never wanted her spotlight. I just wanted a ray of light of my own. Growing up, I became the listener, the quiet one, the one who smoothed over tensions, apologized first, folded myself smaller and smaller so my existence wouldn't disrupt the atmosphere. Vanessa, however, had gravity. She didn't just enter a room, the air rearranged around her. She had confidence, ease, charisma, and yes, beauty. Even when we were little girls, family friends would smile at Vanessa and say, "Oh, she's going to break hearts one day," and then look at me and offer, "You have such nice handwriting, Rebecca." It sounds absurd, small, petty, but dozens of those moments become thousands of those memories, and eventually you don't just feel overshadowed, you start to feel invisible. But I built a life of my own quietly. I worked my way up in my company in Chicago, becoming a hiring director, the kind who interviews, evaluates, and sometimes decides the future of people's careers. I don't flaunt accomplishments. My parents barely ask about them anyway. Conversations with them revolve around Vanessa, her promotions, her apartment, her engagement, her social life. I became the listener again, nodding, smiling, swallowing the ache, until one day I didn't. It happened last month when we were all together at a restaurant for Vanessa's engagement dinner. We were seated at this long table, my parents at one end, Vanessa glowing at the center, her fiancé, Anthony, beside her, and me somewhere near the edge, like an afterthought. Everyone was drinking, laughing, telling stories. And then my mother leaned forward and said, loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear, "We always knew Vanessa would be the one to marry well. She's always been the elegant one, the graceful one." My father chuckled and added, "Yes, Rebecca was always the independent type." Independent. That was his polite word for not desirable. Everyone laughed, including Vanessa, and I felt something inside me crack, not explosively, but with a quiet, final snap. And instead of smiling it off like I usually do, I looked right at my parents and I said, "It's funny how you only show love as long as Vanessa is shining. The rest of us exist in the shadows of your expectations." The table went silent. Vanessa stared at me as if I had slapped her. My father's face reddened, my mother's lips pressed thin like a scar. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just spoke the truth that had been marinating inside me for 3 decades. And in that moment, I became the villain of their narrative. That was the embarrassment they referenced in the group chat. That was my crime, speaking aloud the thing that everyone felt, but no one dared to say. So when I got that text that I was uninvited, I wasn't shocked. I was hurt, yes, but surprised? No. My family had always expected my silence. Punishing me for breaking it was natural to them. But Anthony's reply, Vanessa's fiance, that was the anomaly. His exact message, "Actually, I think Rebecca deserves to be there more than anyone." I reread it over and over. Why would he say that? What did he know? What had he seen? And then a second message came from him, privately, directly to me. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." My blood ran cold. What did he have to say to me? Why privately? Why urgently? That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying memories of every moment Anthony was around us. Every time I caught him observing interactions. Every look on his face during family conversations. Had he noticed things? Had Vanessa told him something about me? Or worse, had she told him something about herself? Morning came with a gray sky and a tight feeling in my stomach. I made myself coffee but couldn't taste it. I kept checking my phone every few minutes. Until at 9:42 a.m., Anthony finally messaged, "Can we meet in person today?" I almost said no. I almost deleted the message. But something inside me, something curious, unsettled, said, "Go." We met downtown at a quiet coffee shop. I arrived first, sitting in a corner booth, palms sweating. Then he walked in. Anthony. Tall, composed, normally very measured. But that day, he looked tense. He slid into the seat across from me, took a breath, and said, "I didn't defend you out of pity. I defended you because you're not the one who should be blamed." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He looked down, rubbed his temple, and said the sentence that would upend everything I thought I knew about my family and about Vanessa. "Rebecca, there's something about your sister you don't know, and I think you've suffered long enough from the lies." I felt the air leave my chest. "What lies?" I whispered. He looked up, directly into my eyes, steady and unwavering, and he said, "Vanessa told me what your parents did when you were kids and why they needed you to always feel lesser." My heart started pounding. I felt like I was staring into a doorway I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. "What did they do?" I managed. Anthony leaned closer, voice low. And then he said, "It wasn't an accident.
that Vanessa became the golden child and you didn't. They made it that way. He paused. I swallowed. Why? I asked. The answer, the real reason, felt like it was hovering right there, just inches away. Anthony took a slow breath. Then he spoke. And the truth he revealed would shift the entire axis of my world.
When Anthony said those words, "They made it that way," I felt something in the universe tilt. People always say moments of revelation feel like explosions, but this felt like a quiet cracking, like a sheet of ice splitting underfoot. I leaned in, barely breathing, and Anthony continued, "Your parents didn't just favor Vanessa. They invested in her success at the expense of yours." I blinked, confused. What does that even mean? Anthony exhaled, and I could tell he'd been holding on to this for a long time. "Rebecca, your parents groomed Vanessa to be perfect, polished, adored, because they needed her to represent them, their legacy, their facade. And they needed you to be the comparison point, the reminder that Vanessa was special." I shook my head slowly. No, nobody does that. Parents don't purposely divide their kids. Anthony gave a sad smile, not of amusement, but of sorrow. "Yours did." And then he told me something that sent me spiraling into memory. "Your mother told Vanessa once, years ago, that you were strong enough to be overlooked, but Vanessa needed the spotlight or she would never become somebody." I froze. Strong enough to be overlooked. Not strong enough to be loved. Not important enough to be celebrated. Strong enough to endure neglect. I swallowed hard, feeling my voice turn shaky. "But why? Why would a mother do that?" Anthony looked at me steadily. "Because your mother grew up as the overlooked child. She swore that her child would never feel like she did. So she chose the daughter she believed had the charisma, and she built her, sculpted her, worshipped her, and then softer. And she used you as the foil." Suddenly, memories began linking, puzzle pieces clicking into place. The birthday parties where Vanessa got lavish cakes and I got modest cupcakes because Rebecca likes simple things. The clothing. Vanessa in coordinated outfits, styled hair, polished shoes, and I in bargain bin basics. Mom brushing Vanessa's hair every morning, gently, lovingly, while my hair was treated like a chore. Vanessa getting violin lessons, ballet, speech coaching, while I got responsibilities, chores, errands, the expectation to be helpful, understanding, patient. And I never complained. I just thought that was normal. Anthony's voice pulled me back. "Your parents needed a golden child to showcase, and they needed the other child to stay quiet enough not to compete." I stared at him. "But Vanessa, she's an adult now. She could break away from that." He nodded. "She could, but she never did, because she liked being adored." I felt something inside me twist painfully. I whispered, "Did Vanessa know?" Anthony hesitated, then nodded. "She did, and she used it to her advantage." That hit like a slap, because that wasn't ignorance. That wasn't innocence. That was complicity. Anthony then said, "There's more." Of course there was. There always is. He explained that Vanessa confided in him during their second year of dating. She told him that she sometimes felt guilty, but not enough to change anything. She said, "Rebecca's always been the sturdy one, the tough one. She doesn't need praise like I do."
And then she laughed, as if my resilience was convenient, as if my endurance excused their neglect. I felt my eyes burn with unshed tears. She always made me feel like I was being dramatic if I ever spoke up, I murmured. Anthony nodded, because that's how they trained her to see you. Then he dropped another revelation. Your father worried you would surpass Vanessa academically. That's why he discouraged you from applying to certain colleges. Remember when he told you that out-of-state schools were too expensive? I remembered, vividly. I had wanted to apply to Northwestern. I had the grades. I had the recommendation. I had a guidance counselor urging me. But Dad insisted I stay local, said it was practical, sensible, financially responsible. Meanwhile, Vanessa applied to an expensive private university out of state, and they paid for it, without hesitation. The weight of that double standard crashed over me. Anthony continued, your parents believe Vanessa had better marriage prospects, better social potential, better optics. That word, optics. My family had always been obsessed with appearances, with how things looked, with how Vanessa sparkled. And I existed, supportively, quietly, invisibly. I leaned back, feeling like the floor was tilting. Anthony, you defended me in that chat. Why? Why now? His expression shifted from somber to determined, because Vanessa confided in me recently, something that made me see everything differently. I held my breath. What did she say? Anthony's jaw tightened. She said she didn't want you at Thanksgiving because she was afraid you'd make things about you again. But then she added, Rebecca is too honest for her own good. I blinked. Her honesty threatens them. Anthony nodded. Exactly. Because truth ruptures illusions, and my family was built on illusions. I whispered, Anthony, what are you really telling me? And that's when he said it. Rebecca, your parents love Vanessa conditionally, based on performance, but they never truly loved either of you unconditionally. They just chose the daughter who upheld their image best. I felt my throat tighten. So I was never the problem. Anthony shook his head. You were never the problem. You were just never the project.
Those words sank into me, heavy, devastating, liberating. Never the project, meaning they never invested in me, not because I wasn't worthy, but because I wasn't useful to their narrative. I wasn't ornamental. I wasn't emblematic. I wasn't their social trophy. I was simply myself. And that wasn't enough for them. I took a shaky breath and asked softly, Anthony, are you marrying her anyway? His eyes darkened, conflicted. He looked down at the table, then back up. I don't know, he admitted, because I'm not sure she knows how to love outside of getting praise. That stunned me. You're saying she learned to love as a transaction? Anthony nodded. Approval is her currency. We sat in silence for a long moment. The coffee cups between us grew cold. Outside, cars passed. Normal life hummed on, unaware of the earthquake happening in my world. Then Anthony's voice softened. Rebecca, I need to tell you something else. Something your parents told Vanessa about you. My pulse picked up. What? His face was sorrowful. They used to tell her, don't worry about Rebecca. She'll be fine on her own. She doesn't need us. I felt my stomach clench. They mistook survival for independence, loneliness for strength. He nodded. And they used your strength as an excuse to neglect you emotionally. I was stunned into silence. For decades, I had asked myself, was I not lovable? Was I not enough? But now I realized the strangest, cruelest reality. I was too strong, too self-sufficient, too emotionally resilient. So they chose to invest their love where it would be visibly returned, where it reflected them. I was the backbone. Vanessa was the showpiece. Finally, I asked the question that scraped raw at my heart. Do you think my parents ever really loved me? Anthony didn't answer right away, and that silence spoke volumes. Eventually, he said, I think they loved the idea of you, but not the you that needed love, attention, warmth. They loved the version of you they didn't have to tend to. I felt a tremor in my chest, a mix of grief and awakening. We finished our conversation, exchanged a quiet goodbye, and I walked home through the cold Chicago streets, feeling like I was living in two realities simultaneously. The old one, built on memories of being overlooked, and the new one, built on the knowledge that it wasn't my failure, but their design. When I reached my apartment, I sat on my couch, staring into space, replaying everything. And then my phone buzzed. A new message. From Vanessa. Just one sentence. Did Anthony talk to you? My breath caught. The question pulsed with anxiety, or perhaps threat. I stared at the screen, and before I could reply, another message came through. This time from my mother. Rebecca, we need to discuss your behavior. I felt something inside me shift. For the first time in my life, I felt the anger not of a child desperate for approval, but of a grown woman who finally sees the pattern clearly. I typed back, what behavior? Speaking the truth? I didn't hit send yet, but I would. Because something was brewing, and the confrontation that was coming would not be silent. I didn't reply to Vanessa or my mother right away. Instead, I sat with Anthony's words echoing through me like a slow, sinking drumbeat. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the flaw. I wasn't the oversight. I was the designated shadow. That truth had changed me. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what Vanessa might say or what my parents might think. If anything, they should be afraid of what I might reveal. The next afternoon, I got another message, not from any of them, but from an unexpected name, Aunt Caroline, my mother's older sister. She lived 2 states away, and we spoke maybe once a year at most. Her message was simple. Rebecca, are you okay? I heard what happened. I frowned. How did she hear? I asked her, and she responded, Your mother called me. She's upset about what you said at the engagement dinner, but I think it's time you knew something. My pulse picked up. Knew what? She replied, Call me, not text. I didn't hesitate. I pressed call. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Rebecca, darling, I'm sorry you're going through this. I always worried something like this would happen. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Aunt Caroline, Anthony told me some things about how Mom and Dad treated me versus Vanessa, but he didn't tell me why they felt the need to divide us to such extremes. There was a pause, a sigh, a silence that stretched seconds into something heavier. Then she said, It wasn't just favoritism, it was fear. I swallowed. Fear of what? Aunt Caroline didn't ease into it. She ripped the veil instantly. Fear that you would outshine Vanessa. Fear that your strengths would overshadow hers. Fear that you were the one who inherited your mother's true potential, not Vanessa. I blinked, stunned. My mother's what? She continued. Your mother wasn't always the underdog. In her youth, she was vibrant, intelligent, ambitious. She had dreams of being someone important. But her parents, your grandparents, overlooked her for her younger sister. They praised the younger one, gave her attention, encouraged her. Your mother was told to be responsible, mature, helpful. I felt the parallel slicing through my chest like glass. 2 generations of the same pattern. Aunt Caroline went on. Your mother swore she wouldn't let the same thing happen, but she didn't break the cycle. She reversed it. Instead of stopping the favoritism, she redirected it. I felt like I was standing on shifting sand. She poured everything into Vanessa, Aunt Caroline said gently, because she saw Vanessa as her second chance. And she suppressed you because she saw you as the ghost of her own neglected younger self. I closed my eyes. So she wasn't punishing me for being weak. She was punishing me for being strong. Yes, Aunt Caroline whispered, because she knew that Vanessa, for all her charm, could never withstand competition from you. You were always the more introspective one, the more observant one, the more emotionally intelligent one, and she feared that. I felt a tightness in my throat. But Vanessa, she must have known. She did, Aunt Caroline confirmed. But Vanessa liked being adored. She inherited your mother's hunger for praise, but not her depth. I sank deeper into the couch. Why didn't you ever tell me? Aunt Caroline paused, voice trembling. Because your mother forbid us. She said you were better off not knowing. She said you were too sensitive, which really meant too perceptive. Then her tone shifted. But Rebecca, there's something else. My pulse quickened. How much more could there possibly be? She continued slowly. Your father played a role too, and it wasn't passive. He didn't just go along with it. He enforced it. How? Aunt Caroline took a breath. Your father believed Vanessa would marry wealth, while you would pursue education and achievement. And he was threatened by the idea of having a daughter who might surpass him intellectually or professionally. I let that sink in. My father, the quiet arbiter of practicality and realism, wasn't just steering me. He was limiting me, proactively. I whispered. So they both held me down for different reasons? Yes, she said. Your mother out of wounded psychology, your father out of insecurity. Then I asked the question that scared me. Did they ever love me? Aunt Caroline exhaled. They loved you as much as they were capable of, but they didn't nurture you as you deserved. They saw you as durable, Vanessa as fragile, and they catered to fragility. I nodded slowly. Resilient children are often forgotten children. Then she said something that shifted everything again. Rebecca, Vanessa is scared of you. She always has been. My brow furrowed. Scared? Yes, because you see through people, you see truth. And Vanessa's entire identity is performance. I didn't respond, because I knew it was true. Then Aunt Caroline asked gently, Are you going to Thanksgiving? I laughed slightly. I'm not invited. Good, because that may be the best thing that ever happened to you. How so? Aunt Caroline hesitated, then said it. Sometimes, exclusion forces us into independence, and independence leads us to our real identity. We spoke for another few minutes. She wished me strength, she said she loved me, and for the first time in a long time, I believed someone meant it. After we hung up, I sat there digesting everything. My mother feared being invisible again. My father feared being surpassed. Vanessa feared losing her spotlight. And I
The quiet daughter became the emotional mule of the family, strong enough to lift everything, but not allowed to shine. That night, at 10:39 p.m., Vanessa called me. Not text, call. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was sharp. I know you talked to Anthony. He talked to me. I corrected. She ignored that. Rebecca, you need to stop making yourself into the victim. You always twist things to look like you're this wounded martyr. I laughed quietly, a sound unfamiliar coming from me. Vanessa, I never wanted attention. You did. She hissed slightly. And you never wanted to play the game. It wasn't a game, Vanessa. It was our lives. She shot back. It was a game, Rebecca. You just didn't know the rules. There it was. The admission. My voice was calm. Tell me something honestly. All these years, did it ever bother you that I was excluded? Vanessa hesitated. Then, no, because it meant I was winning. That hit harder than any cruel remark could, not because of its harshness, but its honesty. And then she added, and don't get self-righteous now. You think you suffered? I had pressure too. I always had to be perfect. I never got to fail. I never got to be ordinary. You think that was fun? I swallowed. No, but at least you were seen. There was silence. Then, you should have stayed in your place, Rebecca. That's the thing, I said quietly. I don't have a place anymore. And I hung up. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, something inside me solidified. The next morning, I woke to another message in the family chat from my father. It said, Rebecca, if you want to fix this, you owe your sister and your mother an apology.
I stared at the words. An apology. For telling the truth. I thought about what Aunt Caroline said, what Anthony revealed, what Vanessa confessed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. So I began typing. My fingers flew across the screen, fueled not by rage, but by clarity. Dad, I'm not apologizing for speaking truth you've avoided for decades. It's time you acknowledge what you did to me growing up and the way you groomed Vanessa as the favorite while using me as the scapegoat of your insecurities. I didn't send it yet. I let the words simmer. Then another message came in from my mother. This conversation is not appropriate for the family group. We will discuss in person at Thanksgiving. I stared at her words. Thanksgiving. The event I'd been uninvited from. Were they reinstating me? Or summoning me? Then another message from Vanessa. No, Rebecca being there will ruin the day. And then from Anthony. Actually, I think it's time the truth is heard from all sides. Silence. Digital. Heavy. Then my father. Fine. Thanksgiving will be for clearing the air. And I realized this wasn't a family dinner anymore. This was a trial. And I was ready. This was a trial, and I was ready. But readiness is one thing, reality is another. As the days crawled toward Thanksgiving, tension seemed to vibrate in the air around me, like static. I didn't reach out to anyone. Not Vanessa, not my mother, not my father, not even Anthony. They wanted me present. Fine. But now I would show up on my terms. The night before Thanksgiving, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because I felt like something inside me was shifting. It almost felt like I'd been walking my whole life, hunched forward, shoulders inward, arms crossed, and suddenly I was standing upright for the first time. The morning came, gray sky, wind pushing cold through my coat. I drove to the house I grew up in, one I hadn't entered in over a year. I stood at the front door for a moment, my hand hovering, breathing slowly. Then I rang the bell. My father opened the door. He didn't smile, just gave a tight nod, stepping aside to let me in. "Rebecca," he said curtly, "glad you came." I glanced at him. "You chose the word fine, not thank you, not we want you here, just fine." He swallowed slightly, jaw clenching. No reply. Inside, the living room was arranged like a stage. My mother on one end of the sofa, Vanessa seated beside her, arms crossed, chin lifted. Anthony sat on the edge of an armchair across from them, not close to Vanessa, not aligned with the parents, subtly separate. That alone already spoke volumes. And then Aunt Caroline was there too, sitting slightly apart from everyone else, posture calm, observant, waiting. I closed the door behind me. No one spoke at first. Then my mother cleared her throat. "Rebecca, we ask you here because the comments you made were inappropriate and hurtful. You attacked your sister's character and embarrassed her." I didn't sit. I stood, coat still on, looking at them evenly. No, I reflected what she's done and the family dynamics surrounding it. Vanessa leaned forward, eyes flashing. "Oh, please. You always dramatize everything. You've always been overly sensitive." Anthony turned slowly, looking at her. "Vanessa, that's not quite true." She stared at him, betrayed. "Excuse me?" Anthony continued, voice calm. "I've been with this family long enough to observe patterns. And Rebecca isn't sensitive. She's perceptive. There's a difference." Vanessa's face stiffened. My mother snapped. "Anthony, this isn't your family matter to dissect." Aunt Caroline interjected softly. "Oh, I think it is. He's about to marry into it. He deserves to understand the environment he's entering." That landed like a cold pebble in water. My father exhaled sharply. "The point is, Rebecca owes this family an apology." I finally sat, slowly, but not submissively. "You think I owe you an apology for being hurt and discarded for years, but you never considered apologizing to me." My father frowned. "Discarded? Oh, come on. We treated you and Vanessa the same." Anthony let out a quiet, incredulous breath, almost a scoff. My mother's eyes darted to him. "Is something funny?" Anthony leaned forward. "I think what's laughable is pretending that's true." Vanessa spun toward him. "Anthony, stop." He didn't. "You want the truth? The real truth? All right." He looked at all of them, voice steady and unyielding. "Every time Rebecca spoke in a group conversation, you brushed her aside. Every time she achieved something, you minimized it. Every time Vanessa did something ordinary, you exaggerated its greatness." Vanessa snapped, "Anthony." But he kept going. "Your mother told Rebecca 3 years ago that Vanessa was the one with the real promise, and that Rebecca's role was to support the family. Your father repeatedly implied Rebecca was too emotional to succeed and should stay close to home. And you, Vanessa, you enjoyed every bit of being placed above her. You never questioned it, not once. Instead, you weaponized it, used it to justify your entitlement. And when Rebecca finally spoke up, suddenly she's the problem?" Silence. Heavy. My mother's face reddened.
That is not a fair representation. Aunt Caroline spoke up. Actually, it is. My mother whipped toward her. Caroline, stay out of this. I can't, she replied calmly. I stayed out of it for decades. I watched Rebecca shrink into herself until she eventually had to leave to find air. Vanessa scoffed. Oh, please. Rebecca always plays the misunderstood one. She could have been part of everything if she just... I cut in softly. If I just stayed smaller. If I just didn't threaten your spotlight. If I just accepted that you were the favorite child. Vanessa stiffened. I wasn't favored. That's your narrative. My father added, this accusation of favoritism is unfair and untrue. Aunt Caroline breathed out. You forced favoritism. My mother turned sharply. Caroline, don't you dare. But Aunt Caroline continued. I was there when Rebecca was 6 and showed you a drawing she made, one that her teacher praised. And you said, that's nice, honey, but look, Vanessa learned a new dance step. I was there when Rebecca tried out for theater in middle school and got the lead role, and you said, well, Vanessa might try next year. I was there when Rebecca told you she got accepted into a better college than Vanessa, and you said, don't brag, Rebecca, it's not polite. I stared at the floor, breathing slowly. My mother's voice shook. That's not how I remember. Of course not, Aunt Caroline said gently, because you weren't the one hurt by it. My father finally stood, face darkening. Enough. Rebecca, this is ridiculous. You've always been dramatic and emotionally needy. We only encouraged Vanessa because she required more validation. She was more fragile. I lifted my gaze slowly. And I was what? Sturdy, strong, conveniently neglectable? He didn't answer, so I continued. Dad, I used to cry in my room after dinner because I felt invisible. I used to rehearse achievements in my head hoping you'd be proud. I'd bring you test scores, awards, accomplishments, and you'd say, good, keep it up. Meanwhile, Vanessa would get praised for breathing. Vanessa shot up. Oh, come on, that's such exaggeration. Is it? Anthony asked softly. Vanessa turned to him, fury and fear mixing. Why are you doing this? Anthony's expression didn't waver, because I want a life with honesty in it. Then the twist hit. Anthony inhaled, looked at Vanessa, then at my parents, then at me. The real reason you all silenced Rebecca is because of the secret. My mother froze. My father's eyes widened. Vanessa visibly paled. My heart accelerated. What secret? Anthony looked directly at my mother. Do you want to say it, or should I? My mother stammered, Anthony, don't. He continued, Rebecca, you're never supposed to find out. But you're not like Vanessa. You're not biologically their child. The world stopped. Time fractured. Air vanished. I stared at him, unable to process. What? Anthony exhaled. They adopted you when you were 2 months old. Vanessa is their biological daughter. You weren't treated the same because they never saw you as the same. My mother started crying instantly. My father closed his eyes, pained, head bowed. Vanessa looked stunned, but not remorseful. More like exposed. My voice came out small, fragile, unsteady. That can't be true. Anthony spoke softly. It is.
I found documents in the study drawer months ago. I confronted Vanessa. She admitted it. I slowly looked at her. She avoided my eyes. Finally, I whispered, "You knew?" She nodded slightly. "Since I was 12. A silence fell that felt like an avalanche. My voice shook. "All these years, you knew I was adopted and you still competed with me?" She lifted her chin, tears in her eyes, but voice cold. "I didn't want to be second to someone who wasn't even—" She stopped herself, but I knew the end of that sentence. Not even blood. The room tightened with the weight of it all. And then I stood up. Without a word, without a scream, without a plea. I picked up my coat, walked to the door, and left. I didn't remember walking down the porch steps or reaching my car. I just remembered the feeling, like the ground beneath me wasn't solid anymore, like everything I'd believed about my life had been stripped away in minutes. I got into the driver's seat, closed the door, and just sat there. My breath was shaky, shallow, trembling. My reflection in the window looked like someone I didn't know. Not a biological daughter, not a chosen child, not a favored sibling, not even fully theirs. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for tears to dry on my cheeks and cold to creep into my bones. When I finally turned the key and drove away, it felt like I was leaving an entire version of myself behind. I didn't go home, not yet. I drove aimlessly through town, past the school where Vanessa and I both attended, past the park where I used to sit alone at lunch, past the cafe where I once waited 2 hours for Vanessa to show up for a sister date she never intended to keep. I ended up on a hill overlooking the city, a place I used to escape to as a teenager when the house felt too small for my emotions. The view was blurred by dusk, lights flickering in windows, strangers living lives untangled from mine. I finally whispered to the empty car, I wasn't even their child. Saying it aloud, it echoed inside me, hollow and surreal. I had spent my whole life trying to belong somewhere I had never truly been seen as belonging. My phone buzzed. First message, Vanessa. I didn't mean it how it sounded. I didn't reply. Second, Mom. Rebecca, please don't drive angry. Come back and we can talk. I didn't reply. Third, Anthony. I'm sorry. I couldn't let them keep lying to you. If you want to talk, I'm here. I stared at that one, at least a minute. Then I put the phone face down and watched the sky deepen from burnt orange to violet. The shock eventually gave way to something else. Clarity. I wasn't an unloved daughter. I was a misidentified one. I wasn't a failed sibling. I was an outsider forced to compete in a game where the rules were rigged from the start. I wasn't overlooked because I was lacking. I was overlooked because I was different. It didn't excuse the hurt, but it explained it. Hours later, I finally went home. When I got inside, the silence felt comforting. I slipped off my coat, dropped onto the couch, and closed my eyes, letting my breathing slow down. Once I had the strength, I finally grabbed my phone and texted Anthony, "Come over." 10 minutes passed, 15, 20, then a knock. I opened the door, and there he was, not in judgment, not in pity, just presence. He stepped inside quietly and sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, voice gentle, "You deserved to know the truth." I stared at him. "You blindsided me with it." He nodded. "I did, and I'm sorry for the pain it caused. But I'm not sorry for exposing the lie." I swallowed hard. "How long have they known I knew nothing?" He sighed. "Your parents, obviously from the beginning. Vanessa's since childhood.
Caroline, I'm not sure. But me, I found out 3 months ago. I looked at him sharply. 3 months? He nodded. Yes, and I wanted them to tell you themselves. I begged them. I told your mother secrecy was cruel. She kept saying, not yet. Rebecca wouldn't handle it well. I almost laughed bitterly. And yet, here I am, handling it. He nodded. Better than they expected. My voice wavered. I keep thinking, if they had told me, maybe I would have felt chosen, not lesser. He leaned forward slightly. Rebecca, you were chosen. They didn't rescue you from tragedy, but they did choose to raise you. Their mistake was never understanding the weight of that choice. I wiped my face with my sleeve. They didn't treat me like a choice. They treated me like an accessory. He inhaled deeply. Yes, because they didn't resolve their own insecurity about adoption. Instead of celebrating you, they minimized you and overcompensated for Vanessa. I was quiet for a while. Then I asked a question that had been clawing inside me since the reveal. Do you know who my biological parents are? Anthony looked conflicted. There's some information in the adoption file, names, origins, but I didn't read further. I didn't think it was my place. I nodded slowly. You were right about that. He exhaled. Then he said something that made my chest ache. But I hope, when you're ready, you'll look for them. Maybe not to form a relationship, but to understand where your heart came from. I rubbed my eyes weary. Do you think they loved me? He answered softly. I think they let you go because they couldn't give you the life you deserved. That is its own kind of love. Eventually, he left, and I went to bed drained. But when I woke the next morning, something was different. Not panic, not grief. Something quieter. A pulse of self-understanding beneath the hurt. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and just existed. Around noon, the doorbell rang. It was Aunt Caroline. She didn't ask to come in, she just hugged me first, and I didn't fight it. She entered and sat with me at the kitchen table. Her voice was soft but firm. I knew you'd learn the truth someday, and I'm sorry I didn't push your parents harder to be honest earlier. I asked her, did you see a difference between us, even when I was little? She nodded gently. Yes, but not the one your parents saw. Vanessa, she was always desperate to be chosen. You just wanted to be seen. I blinked back tears. She continued, your parents were afraid of losing Vanessa's love if they praised you too much, afraid of the idea that genetics didn't dictate loyalty, and afraid that if you felt too strong, you'd leave. I absorbed that slowly. But I did leave. She gave me a sad little smile. Yes, because they tried so hard to keep you small. I felt something sharp and cathartic crack inside me. She added, and now that you know the truth, you finally get to decide who you are, not in relation to them, but in relation to yourself. That conversation, for the first time in my life, gave me permission to exist without comparison. Later that afternoon, Vanessa called. I let it ring 4 times, then picked up. She didn't sound angry. She sounded terrified. Rebecca, please don't hate me. I was quiet. Then I said, I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. Her voice cracked. I was just a kid when I found out, and I didn't know how to process it.
I always felt like I needed to keep my place, to stay the real daughter. I replied softly, Vanessa, you were the real daughter. I wasn't competing. I never asked for attention that belonged to you. I just wanted space for myself. She sniffled. I twisted it. I made it a competition against you, and I'm sorry. I didn't know if forgiveness was ready in me, but I knew honesty was. You hurt me. You benefited from my invisibility, and I don't know how long it will take to build anything between us again. But I'm done fighting for room in that house. I'm done shrinking so you can expand. There was silence. Then Vanessa whispered, I understand. After hanging up, I felt lighter. Not healed, but anchored. A week later, I met with my parents. Not at the house, but at a neutral space, a small cafe. They looked older than I remembered, more fragile. My mother's voice shook. Rebecca, we failed you. We misunderstood what love should have looked like. My father added, voice cracked, I thought treating you the same wasn't necessary because I believed Vanessa needed more affirmation. I never understood that you needed something too, something we didn't give you. I stared into my coffee before answering. I spent years thinking there was something wrong with me, that I was less lovable, less worthy, less special. My mother began to cry silently. I continued, voice steady. But now I know I wasn't broken. I was simply different. And you didn't know how to love that difference. My father wiped his eyes, a man who almost never cried. I am asking for another chance. Not as the father you're expected to respect, but as a man who's trying to unlearn his failures. I looked at them, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel the lesser daughter. I didn't feel the forgotten one. I felt myself. I said, I'm not promising any fast healing, but I'm not closing the door. My mother whispered, Thank you. In the following months, something unexpected happened. I didn't try to rebuild the old identity. I built a new one. I went to therapy. I learned to sit with my worth. Not earned, not compared, not conditional. I started volunteering with youth who were adopted, kids seeking belonging, identity, and truth. And in helping them, I slowly healed myself. Vanessa and I didn't become instantly close, but we started talking, gently, carefully, honestly. Our relationship became real for the first time. Not a rivalry, not a hierarchy. Just two women relearning each other without history dictating the dynamic. Anthony stayed in my life for a while. Supportive, constant, thoughtful, though not romantically. We eventually grew apart naturally, but with gratitude. He had been the mirror that forced the truth out. A year later, on Thanksgiving, I returned to the family home. Not because I needed their acceptance, but because I no longer needed to fear their rejection. My mother opened the door, eyes warm but cautious. My father hugged me, not tightly, not desperately, just sincerely. Vanessa greeted me with a real, fragile smile. And for the first time in my life, we all sat together without roles assigned. Later that night, as I drove away, I understood something deeply. Family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by honesty, respect, and presence. I didn't need to belong to them in blood. I chose to belong to myself. And now I ask you, the listener, have you ever discovered a family secret or faced a betrayal that reshaped your identity? Share your story in the comments. You're not alone.